this was our concluding slide. We had taken our original Ansoff matrix concept and added some different activities in each of the quadrants. So, we called that current market, current product, class of activities called that market penetration strategy. New product in the current market, we call that product development strategy and the various actions entailed there in front of you. And market development strategy when we are looking at taking current products to new markets, could be a new geography, could be a new type of buyer and so on. So, like if you take personal computers originally developed for scientific, professional, business use, but now you want to take it to a new market which is say young teenager market for games and entertainments, or if you want to take it to the market for homemakers, housewives, or if you want to take it to the market children looking at an educational toy or an education related device, then it is a current product in the new market, but it means some new targeting, some new value proposition, even if cosmetic, some new packaging which could be in color, which could be new additional features, which could be bigger keyboards, which could be options with respect to better screen resolution, could be a better sound system and so on. So, these are the different activities that are marketing strategies coming out of the corporate strategy or corporate strategy that can create new market strategies. So, a company might be interested, so say if the Tata conglomerate wants to expand its reach within the market in China, then there are actions that are to be taken by the different Tata businesses. They will have to prioritize which SBU is going to make the first foray and how that is going to be supported, but accordingly one of these quadrants may come into play. We will now develop this into a little bit more interesting dimension. This is quite famous in the strategy literature, originally developed by the Boston Consulting Group, popularly known as BCG, and they actually looked at a similar, it is not exactly the Ansoff matrix, but it is similar. It looks as a 2 by 2 matrix of relative market share and market growth rate. So, it gives us a lot of insights into what we need to do with marketing, how we can formulate our marketing strategies under different circumstances, overall strategic circumstances as depicted by this particular diagram. If your relative market share is low, okay, if your relative market share, so here we have low to high and here we have low to high. So, if your relative market share is high, if your relative market share is high, the relative market share is high and the market growth rate is low, What does it mean? It means the market growth rate low means that you are actually somewhere where the market is saturating. There is growth rate, it is a low growth rate. So, it may be the flat part of the, so you may be somewhere here. Now, what happens at this stage? At this stage, usually people who are having smaller market share, they do not find the business attractive enough. So, usually there is a shakeout when the market starts maturing. Either relatively weaker competitors are absorbed, acquired by bigger competitors, or maybe 2 or 3 smaller players can merge together. So, with the when Nokia was rapidly rising in the mobile handset market, the dominant position of Nokia and Motorola forced Sony and Ericsson, smaller players in the market at that stage, to come together, form a merger called Sony Ericsson. Over the years, they almost walked out of the mobile handset market. Today, we see Nokia, which had a very dominant position, a high growth track record for 15 years, under pressure from new entrants like Samsung or Apple. Some of the market analysts are predicting that they might go the way of Sony Ericsson in 2012 or 13. Of course, Nokia is a great company. They are also positioning significant response strategies, and so the jury is still out that what will happen really. But the point here I am trying to make is that even today, when the handset market is quite matured in the developed countries, in the Western market, because there are very few players at this stage, though the market growth rate is quite small, it is nowhere comparable to the growth rate of mobile handset in India, where tens of millions of people are becoming new subscribers and buying new handsets. But in a country like Finland, or in a country like Germany, or in a country like United States, where the penetration may be almost 100%, almost everybody in countries like Hong Kong or territories like Hong Kong or Singapore, they have maybe 2 or 3 phones. In such a situation, the growth rate is small. The market may be growing only 2 to 3%, which is maybe just coming from replacement and coming from very few new customers joining the fray. But because there are very few players, even that small growth rate, your margins can be significant, and therefore, the cash flow can be very significant, because you are not investing anymore in new plant and machinery, you are not investing in new market channels and so on. Remember, I am talking about only the developed market for mobile handsets. So, the few players who are still there, they are raking in cash, and that is why this segment, where the market share is high, growth rate is low, the business is often termed as the cash cow. There are many people who have later on protested against this use of cow, dog and such terminologies, but let us stay with the traditional terms that were used for these segments in the original Bcg matrix. So, if the market share is low and the industry growth rate is also low, so industry growth rate is low, market share is also low, then that business obviously is not attractive. Sometimes you need to retain that business because, so it is no longer cash cow, it is actually you have to still do something to retain your position there because your market share is low, the market is not growing. So, it would have been better to completely get rid of this part, but it is not always possible to do that, you may still have to, but obviously this is not going to be our focus, not going to be our focus. Our focus will obviously be first of all here, which is the industry growth rate is high and your relative market share is high. So, this is where iPad for example is today. Tablets, these handheld tablets with multiple functions, which is somewhat a communication device, somewhat an internet appliance, somewhat an entertainment device, somewhat a personal digital assistant. iPad has somehow created a compelling value bundle, and it is still a very small percentage of PC owners or laptop owners own a tablet, and there is still a possibility out there that these types of devices represented by the iPad might completely replace the notebook, the laptop, the notebook, the netbook, the ultrabook and so on. So, this is a market which is growing rapidly even in developed countries. The growth potential in emerging countries like India and in China, the growth rate is explosive. And Apple has obviously a very strong market share, the closest may be Samsung, and this is therefore a star. This is focus. But as you can see, you do not get a business like this every day. This kind of phenomenal success examples are few and far between, and also 20 years back Motorola with their mobile handset had a business which was a star business. 10 years back Nokia with their mobile handsets had a business which was a star business. But over time technology changes, new value propositions emerge, particularly in this type of industries, and today in most industries. Rapid change, compressed life cycle. So, what is star today become cash cow tomorrow. There is another type of business where the relative market share is low, but the market is growing rapidly. So, a company like Micromax in India or some of those other Indian mobile phone manufacturers, they have 2%, 5%, 6% market share. The market itself is growing rapidly, but there are so many other factors. What will Apple do? Will they introduce a low end phone in the iPhone category? Will there be a revolutionary new product from Nokia where they will be able to truly leverage their alliance with Microsoft? Will the display technology change so radically in 2014 that the structure or the form of the mobile phone will change? So, these people, the domestic manufacturers of mobile phones, at that stage may have to set up a complete new supply chain. They may not have access to the new display technology. They may be swamped by the consumption pattern or customer preferences for such products. So, therefore, when your market share is low, even though the market growth rate is high, we put a question mark there. Now, you see these bubbles. Some of the bubbles are big, some bubbles are small. These are various businesses, and somehow they can represent the relative allocation of resources, attention, and so on. The Bcg matrix comes from an era where businesses mostly were conglomerates, many businesses were conglomerates. The market was on the whole rising, growing. Post Second World War, for 20, 30, 40 years, worldwide the market was in a growth mode. So, businesses therefore wanted to develop a portfolio approach. So, this is often also called the portfolio. So, it understood that you need to invest in some question mark because this can become tomorrow's big winners. You obviously need to focus on your stars, but businesses where you have high market share and the market is growing rapidly, it is like a jet engine, jet plane taking off. It needs huge amount of resources. If you need that continuous injection, so these businesses, even though they are high growth, even though the market share, the market itself is expanding, your market share is expanding, you have to continuously invest, therefore, they may be cash negative or cash neutral, at least demanding a very high cash flow, cash input. So, you need to also nurture these businesses where your market share is high, the growth rate is low, but that means there are fewer competitors and therefore, this is big cash generator. So, businesses understood that in the long run you need to have few of these and few of these and gradually get out of these. can't switch off sometimes overnight. So, this is the portfolio approach which is related to the Unsolved matrix, but accordingly gives us marketing strategies for these various options. Obviously, the promotion that you will have to do here for your star will be quite different from here, because here your focus has to be more on loyalty, on retention of customers, whereas here your focus has to be on acquisition of new customers, right. So, the BCG matrix, the portfolio approach gives us a portfolio of marketing strategies to be used for different segments, and therefore, our budget allocation for marketing across the different P's of marketing will be different in different segment. So, this is what I was talking about, that stars over time become cash cows. So, Nokia had a star business 10 years back. Today, they have a cash cow business, and sometimes what was a question mark business, that means will it fly? When iPads were introduced, even during the first 6 months, people were skeptical. But when iPad 2 was introduced, it already moved from the question mark status to the star status. So, this is the point that we discussed, that the stars over time become cash cows, and some of the question marks over time become stars. So, this is kind of a cycle that goes on, and unfortunately it also goes there. So, you need to create new activities. So, you see it is actually not different from some discussion that we had in the product life cycle, that this S curve needs to become an E curve. So, while the market is maturing, at the same time you need to nurture new businesses. So, while you are actually generating cash here, you have to have developmental activity which is absorbing cash, and ultimately therefore, this concept that we discussed in an earlier session is almost same as the concept that we are discussing here. So, this concept is very familiar at the strategy level, at the corporate strategy level in the strategy literature, whereas this concept is more prevalent in the marketing literature, but they are obviously related and based on the same fundamentals. There are some criticisms about this marketing, this portfolio approach, because for example, the market growth rate or the industry growth rate is often is not a good depiction of the attractiveness, because there may be some technology changes that are brewing at the back that can disrupt the attractiveness of the current industry. There are great examples that, for example, when steel plants were growing bigger and bigger, the steel industry in the post Second World War was a major industry, because worldwide there was construction activity. But these steel mills going bigger and bigger ignored the smaller mini mills that were growing, that were getting developed, because the mini mills were initially focused on low end products like flat parts required in the construction industry, or bar and rod used for low end application. But over time the mini mills became more sophisticated, and the famous book by Christensen talks about this Innovators Dilemma, and it talks about how the major players or a major industry which is growing very well can be disrupted by a new development. So, market growth rate is not always an absolute depictor of the industry attractiveness. So, because the market growth rate may ignore or may hide the possible disruption that may be brewing in an adjacent field or in a related field. Similarly, the relative market share also sometimes is not a good descriptor. For example, the relative market share of Nokia is very high in India, but that may not save their game because the high pressure on their market share in United States or in Europe, which has been their home market. So, as they lose market share in Europe due to competitors like Apple or Samsung, even though they may have a high relative market share in India, the overall competitive strength may get marred. So, in a globalized world today, therefore, looking at the market share in an individual SBU sometimes may not give us the complete picture. And there are some of these other criticisms which are there on your screen. But in spite of all these criticisms, the BCG matrix still remains a very important framework for correlating corporate strategy with marketing strategy. This is a little better depiction of the same concept, where we have actually taken the industry attractiveness not just high low, but we have also created a high, medium and low, and a business competitive position. Now, this is a higher level concept than market share, because within this it not only looks at the market share of today, but it looks like customer loyalty, it looks at technology, it looks at patents or intellectual property, and it looks like some of the issues like brand equity, which we will discuss later. But at this point, it is important to note that your competitive position is not only depicted by your current market share or even your projected market share growth. It has to be substantiated by the technological position of your product or your whole product portfolio, the changing nature of underlying technologies. If semiconductor technologies change or if display technologies change, televisions will change. But we were saying that compared to the BCG matrix, where we mainly look at the market growth rate versus the relative market share, compared to that, our diagram that we have just been discussing, the industry attractiveness, the business position matrix, the portfolio approach is a superior concept, because when we look at business competitive position, that is in fact a better concept than current market share or the growth rate of the market. And industry attractiveness also is a higher level concept. Just as in business competitive position, we look at marketing skills, knowledge, intellectual property, the brand equity and so on. In the same way, in industry attractiveness, we look at not only the current size, but also the growth rate that is there, the competitive intensity, the price level and profitability, and these two concepts are actually in a way also connected with the life cycle position of that particular industry, because obviously if the price levels are better and profitability is good, then it is perhaps somewhere in this region of the product life cycle. So, there is a lot of steam left in that particular growth engine. And of course, there are issues relating to government regulations. So, even if an industry is doing quite well today, it might tomorrow under government regulation become a restricted industry. So, for example, for many years ship breakage, that means taking old sea vessels and then breaking up those ships for reusable parts used to be a good business in certain parts of Gujarat, and India kind of became a global destination for this salvage operation. But there are now government regulations with respect to workers' health, safety and other environmental issues, and such businesses have therefore are not that attractive as they used to be. Many times as developed markets create more stricter regulations with environmental sensitivity, some of those types of operations shift to emerging countries where the regulations may be lax, but as time goes by, the emerging countries also adopt strict regulations with respect to safety, health, environment, and then some of those industries may not be as attractive as they were before, rightly so. So, if you actually use this sort of high, medium, low in industry attractiveness, and if you use business competitive position also this high, medium, low, then you can actually get not a 2 by 2 matrix, but a 3 by 3 matrix, and which gives us some interesting ways to build our overall business portfolio, product portfolio, different marketing approaches or a portfolio for marketing strategies. So, as you can see here, you can then divide your options in 3 classes. The first being business which is showing high growth potential. So, this is where actually you are combining your strengths with opportunities. These are the cases where you are actually taking your high competitive position with high attractiveness in the industry. So, maybe you have some unique technology and that business is going. So, today for example, Apple with their iPad or Samsung with their various forms of combinations of tablets and mobile phones may be in this kind of a quadrant. So, obviously, this is the quadrant for invest and grow. Then in the second, which is kind of falls in between, this is where you either hold your position or you try to selectively invest in further subsections of that market. So, at this stage, for example, for Nokia, high level feature phone, but not as attractive a smartphone as their competitor Apple or Samsung has. For that, it may be a good idea to selectively invest for high growth in a market like India, but it may not be a good idea to go gung ho with that product in China, where the iPhone has a very significant position ahead of Nokia's offering. So, therefore, the position for Nokia is still strong, but at this stage it has to either maintain its position in some markets like its own market in Finland or certain parts of Europe, and selectively invest in some emerging markets, but not be as gung ho across the world as Samsung would be or Apple would be with their offerings. And then you have the other category where you say harvest or divest. Harvest means that, as we discussed while discussing, that where your market share is high, the industry growth rate is low, your competitive intensity has come down. So, that market is excellent for cash generation. So, that cash cow market, therefore, is an operation, is what we call harvesting operation. That means you try to get everything that you can get from that marketplace, and it still has good money flowing in for some years to come. So, in fact, for example, while many parts of the world would have shifted to high end 5 blades, 3 blades razor, the single blade throwaway razor from Gillette, from the same company. So, while the 5 blade what we call, I think, Gillette Max or something, that may be positioned in this in certain developed market, but it may be the single blade throwaway option may still be a good option for years to come in emerging markets like, say, India or Bangladesh or Nepal or Sri Lanka. So, this will allow us to look at our business in terms of sort of 3 segments, as you see. So, you have this one cluster where you have different combination of high industry attractiveness with medium competitive position, or medium industry attractiveness with high competitive position. These will constitute what we will call invest and grow. The middle, which are the 2s, these are the businesses where we will like to selectively grow or maintain our current position, because these are the so called cash generating cash cow businesses. And then there are businesses where we have to manage the exit. They may still be quite good for revenues as well as profits for certain number of years, and this is where we have what we say is this is a managed exit strategy. And you can combine these 3 strategies, that is invest and grow, selectively grow or maintain or hold position, and divest and harvest. These 3 clusters can be maintained, and obviously, as you can see, that your strategy for the group 3, that is for harvest and divest, will be different from the strategy in terms of marketing that you would follow for the invest and grow. So, invest and grow, your promotion investment will be high, your distribution expansion enlisting new channels, going in for incentives, going in for different kinds of promotions, all will be valid in that segment. Whereas, when you are trying to divest and harvest, your main idea will be to maximize your availability, to ensure that your products are on the shelf and getting proper attention from the retailers across those markets where they still have significant value. And so, all three types of businesses need strategic attention, but those attentions will be the profile of your attention strategy will be different for different segment. Let us look at some of the other aspects of strategic planning that goes into formulating marketing strategy. One of them we have already seen when we discussed at those two options, option A and option B, with different kinds of net present values, different types of cash generation velocities, where we saw that accumulated cash deficit, or that means the initial investment in the two marketing options were the same to start with, but the rate of cash generation and the both strategies yielded after 5 years positive net present value, but one had a faster pickup at the later stage and one had a faster pickup at an earlier stage and then a bit of a slowdown. So, as we discussed, depending on your company's cash reserve, cash position and growth objective, and some of those can come from this analysis. So, if you actually are in a market which is this one category, that is invest and grow, you are prepared to take some initial slow start, but you know, because that is a market where maybe due to your technology, maybe due to your patents, maybe due to your customer loyalty, or maybe due to the growth rate, you feel that it is worthwhile to stay put in the long run in that particular business. So, that is what we call one type of value based planning, that is the net present value, which is quite important because it pays good attention to cash flow as opposed to mere profitability. And for new types of businesses, cash flow is, or liquidity is of higher level of importance often. For entrepreneurial marketing, again, cash flow is the king. So, one has to pay more attention to, therefore, to NPV oriented strategy, but you need not necessarily be focused only on that strategy which gives you a faster payback, because if you are in the class 2 type of you may be interested in a payback period, but if you are in the class 1 you may be looking at a more longer range view. Another important concept that is to be introduced is called the EVA, or economic value added. The idea here is that you may generate profit out of a business, your marketing effort may be generating sufficient revenues as well as margins, but you have to always compare your return on invested capital and what you would have got just if you had put that money in the bank, and therefore, sort of risk free return that you would have got from that investment. So, if you have 100,000 rupees or you have 10 million rupees, and if you put that in the bank today, you will get interest maybe at the rate of 10% or maybe even higher. or if you be more safe, maybe 8-9%. So, let us take 10%. So, you have this 100 million rupees, you can get 10 million rupees just risk free, almost risk free interest, and if we use that as a proxy of what we call cost of that capital, then so which is actually calculated by capital employed into average cost of capital. So, this is the 100 million, and if the cost of capital is about 10%, then your return, if it is not more than 10 million rupees, then you have a negative economic value added, and therefore, that strategy is actually value eroding, as we say. So, on paper you have revenue, good revenue, you have good margin, but if you are not beating the risk free return that you would have got from your investment, then why be in that business? And this is often the reason why we decide to divest or from certain businesses. So, this is again another important measure when we look at our calculations for choosing between strategic options in marketing. Of course, these are very sort of pat, these value based NPV or EVA, but as you see in all of these cases, particularly for NPV, you are looking at a forecast, because you are looking at a 5-year projection, and then using the discounting rate you are reflecting it to the net present value. So, if the forecasts are wrong, either they are more pessimistic or they are too optimistic, you will actually end up making a wrong decision. And we generally have a tendency to always look at a future is always rosier, and that optimism among the business executives often created flawed plans when it was a value based planning. So, value based plannings are good to making comparative evaluation, but to make absolute judgment, because when you are making comparative evaluation, then you are using the same frame of mind. If you have a more optimistic frame of mind, then all your forecasts will be optimistic, and then if you compare, if one is better than the other, then that may be an okay way to proceed. But if you have only one decision that you are looking at and you use this value based planning, then you have to be far more careful that you are objective and not swayed by subjective perceptions. The customer equity, which is actually derived from the customer lifetime value, a concept that these are the two important concepts that we have introduced in the earlier two sessions, which are important for evaluating strategic plan. So, these two tools or concepts are the net present value, looking at your cumulative cash flow, the payback period, the recovery period. These are a set of important considerations. The other set of important considerations are looking at the customer lifetime value, and therefore, the aggregate of that, from that you actually look at the economic return from your prospective marketing initiative. So, if it enhances your customer lifetime value, then you can say overall it is enhancing the customer equity, and it is a good plan. So, what we are saying is, therefore, if you have a strategy, marketing strategy, and you are wanting to compare it with respect to some other alternatives, then use your NPV based analysis, use your economic value added or EVA based analysis, use your customer lifetime value aggregated as customer equity analysis, and based on that you can choose among strategic alternatives, and you can decide where you want to invest and grow, where you want to hold your position or selectively grow, and where you want to divest or harvest. Finally, the role of marketing is therefore, in the overall context of the corporate strategy, to produce a map of product market combination and what to do in each one of those market combination. So, we were discussing taking the case of Woodland. So, you have one set which is looking at Woodland's foray in China market, and therefore, certain products that you are taking to that market, which in that news item that we discussed talked about adventure products or adventure lifestyle related products from Woodland portfolio. So, China market with that product portfolio will have one set of strategy. The 75% revenue coming from the domestic market, where it may have more than 50% market share for tough shoes for rough use. In that market, therefore, you have to hold your position, selectively grow your market in very decided areas, and accordingly develop another set of marketing strategy. And thirdly, if it actually has introduced, say, I am taking a hypothetical example here, that they found some mosquito, developed some mosquito repellent cream to go with people going for camping and hiking, trekking trips. Good customers of Woodland products, otherwise their core product, which is footwear. Now, that may not be doing very well. After 2 years of launch, it may still be quite behind products coming from Odomos and other such brands. So, it might actually decide for those categories of offerings a strategy for divestment. So, you have to therefore look at these three sets of combinations, that means grow, harvest, and in between selectively grow and maintain position. Each should have different sets of budgets, different accountabilities and responsibilities, which will have to be differently monitored. To summarize, competitive strategy should have three characteristics. It should generate customer value. Remember, customer value is the fountainhead. The economic value is derived out of the customer value. So, the shareholder value is derived out of the customer value. So, to remain focused on shareholder value is often what we say a non-market oriented strategy. It is often a short-sighted strategy, can lead to wrong directions. So, remain focused on customer value and enhancing that continuously, innovating new ways of enhancing customer value. So, it should, good marketing strategy should generate, enhance, innovate customer value. The superior value therefore is to be judged whether you are doing okay, whether you are doing better, whether you are doing worse than your plan. Again, test it in the perspective of the customer's mind. So, constant feedback from the marketplace is a prime responsibility of the marketing department as an input to the company's overall strategic plan and monitoring its progress as implementation unfurls. And very important, and we are going to discuss it in greater depth in the next session, the competitive aspect of your strategy. So, your strategy may look very good on paper, but if it is something that is easily emulated by 15 other companies, and then it is not what we call a sustainable advantage. So, what is the way to create sustainable advantage against competitive onslaught in marketing strategy is what we will look at in the following session. Thank you.